Hi all, our game of the day today will be Karpov versus Bareev in round 2 of the classic 1994 Linares tournament. So what happens in round 2? This was quite a sleepy game, I would say. Karpov, playing white, played e4. His opponent Evgeny Bareev played e6, the French defence, which I've just done a 4-part series on. So you should know that this is the Tarrasch variation. Karpov playing knight d2 is the Tarrasch, and c5 is one of the more active ways to challenge the centre immediately. So black is either content with an isolated queen pawn, with a later e takes d5, e takes d5, or will play queen takes d5 later and try and dissolve the centre and make use of the active piece play. In this game though, after e takes d5, Bareev played e takes d5. So we end up now going into an isolated queen pawn situation. Karpov plays this bishop b5 check. So the power waiting move a6 wasn't played before. So bishop b5 check is a way of white accelerating to the end game, being able to castle quickly, and also just being able to focus on this isolated pawn on d5 without any annoying pins on g4 later. So the light squared bishops are removed. And now after bishop e7, so Karpov plays d takes c5, capturing away from the centre just to isolate this d pawn. So we have classic Tarrasch defence play. So knight d4, blockading the isolated pawn. Queen d7, now knight 2 to f3, so reinforcing the blockade. After castles, Karpov played bishop f4. So the bishop means that the king can be nicely protected if necessary with bishop g3. So Bareev probably not very keen to play bishop d6 at the moment. He plays just rook fe8. So he's trying to keep his pieces active on these two lines. So rook e1, bishop f8. But he doesn't mind an exchange of rooks here. But Karpov actually plays knight e5. Interestingly, Rybka thinks queen c7 is okay. There's no immediate tactic if queen c7 was played. But Bareev actually played queen a4, which is quite interesting. It provokes a pawn kind of weakness, I suppose, on the semi-open file. So this is a target later, this c3 pawn. But so Karpov is saying, do you want an exchange of queens? And I'll head to this endgame where, hopefully I'm going to exploit your isolated queen's pawn. Queen a6 was played, and again Karpov offered the exchange of queens. So kind of a sleepy game in round 2. Karpov just content for a tiny advantage. Nothing exciting, not in the style of, say, Kasparov or Fischer. He's just trying to reach a comfortable endgame and just play on this structural weakness in the black position, this isolated queen pawn. Black now obliges and exchanges queens and then plays bishop d6. And now Karpov finds a way to further simplify the position now with knight d7, temporarily leaving his bishop en prise because this knight will be en prise. So bishop takes f4, he exchanges rooks, and knight takes c5. So there's nothing to worry about an infiltration. That knight takes care of the e2 square at the moment, and black's b7 pawn is en prise here. So actually Bareev played bishop c7. If knight takes b7 here, then just rook b8 and rook takes b2. So the knight just comes back to d3. After bishop b6, knight b3. Let's assess the position. Black's still got that isolated pawn. And Bareev now starts playing aggressively on both sides of the board. We'll see soon an a5 a4 by black, followed by g5 g4, believe it or not. Where are black's piece counterplay sources? This c file will be important, and he tries to play on that. And maybe he's trying to dissolve his pawn. It's interesting, it's as if Karpov wasn't even bothered about maintaining a blockade on this pawn. Instead, he later allowed it to be dissolved, as we'll see. So king f8, rook d1. So it does look as though he's targeting the pawn and he might be playing knight f4. But now comes a5. And here, king f1 simply. So let's have a look here. Is knight f4 playable here just to try and target that pawn? Putting it through Rybka? No, just g5 apparently, or a4, and an advantage to black according to Rybka. For example, knight d2, and we see now classic counterplay by black, knight g4. So Karpov probably didn't like this sort of position. So knight takes d5 here. And now, believe it or not, not the immediate bishop takes f2, because then maybe just king f1 followed by h3, which is very precarious. Actually, let's have a very quick look at that, this position. This might be okay for black as well with bishop c5. But actually Rybka recommends actually knight f2 or bishop c5. So this would be fine for black because there's a lot of counterplay here. So Karpov wanted to avoid this kind of situation with this f2 pawn vulnerability. So winning that d5 pawn is of no great significance in a lot of these variations. So which is why he seemed to adopt a rather, not caring attitude about letting black dissolve this isolated d pawn, as we're about to see. He plays knight d2. Now here, if d4 then c4. So black plays a4, and then now at least Karpov he locks this pawn, so that can't be used to undermine the c3 square with a temporary pawn sack. And now we see g5, so very aggressive play from Bareev in this simplified position, perhaps overly so. And after knight f3, g4. Now with this manoeuvre knight f3 to h4 now, okay, Karpov's coming into f5, but he's just allowed black to dissolve the isolated d pawn with d4, and you wouldn't really have thought of this. You would, one would normally associate Karpov with, exploiting, the structural weaknesses by not letting them be dissolved. But that's exactly what he's done. He's allowed Bareev to dissolve the isolated pawn. So why has he done this? Well, knight f5, and he's got a nice knight on f5, so he's got some piece pressure. After bishop b6, knight b4, yeah, both his knights are nice and active. Rybka doesn't think much of the position, it thinks about equal. But actually this is more uncomfortable for black than it is for white in over the board, human versus human. Because black's counterplay is not much, but he can attack the f2 pawn, so he does that. And Karpov actually, he allows his pawns to become isolated now. He plays f3 because he's also breaking up black's pawns. Let's have a look after this. So both sides now have isolated pawns on the king side. But Karpov no longer has to worry about this f2 square. The knight can't go to f2, just rook d2, and it's pointless. Well, actually, let's have a quick look. Knight f2, actually just rook d7 advantage to white, according to Rybka, big advantage to white. So that's hopeless to get the knight to f2. So it goes back to c5. Now after h4, rook d8, Karpov played rook d5, with slight pressure. But here we see probably the most disastrous move of the entire tournament. Or maybe the most disastrous move that year by a grandmaster. You will not believe the next move. In fact, shall I give you 5 seconds to see, what is the worst possible move do you think black, a strong grandmaster, can play, who was rated 2685? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. He plays bishop a7. It's unbelievable. He allowed rook takes d8 mate. So we see one of the worst blunders of all time. He could have just done anything else. I mean, rook takes d8 is okay. I mean, rook takes d5 rather, and then just bishop d8. And black might even be better in this kind of continuation with bishop f6, bishop takes c3, and the king. These pawns might be proven weak in this endgame. So Rybka gives a slight advantage to black. So instead, we saw that disaster. Let's have a quick overview and summary of this game. So the French defence Tarrasch variation, played in a kind of sleepy looking way by Karpov, but he's always controlling the counterplay. He's content with a tiny advantage, wanting to go quickly into an endgame, getting all the pieces off virtually, and even allowing black to dissolve the d pawn, because he ends up with slight piece pressure in the resulting position. And he doesn't even mind, straight away after allowing that dissolution of dissolving of the d pawn, he doesn't mind isolating his pawns, because he's got better pieces at the end of it all. It's turned into something quite positive, modestly positive, and it shouldn't have been disastrously winning as it was. But as it was, bishop a7 was played, and then we saw rook takes d8, checkmate. Unbelievable. In fact, it's probably unlikely that rook takes d8 was played I assume actually Bareev resigned. If anyone has the gossip on that, please leave any comments on YouTube about that as well. Anyway, thanks very much, and see you on YouTube.